first thing I want to do is acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are on at the moment, the Darawal people. They were incredible at carrying out a very symbiocene-like way of living without depleting or extracting. It was a very harmonious and wonderful connection to country that is still being cultivated today. And I'd like to acknowledge their traditional owners, the past, the present, and their emerging owners as well. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that Farm It Forward grows on, and they are the Gundungurra people and the Darug people. And again, the same thing, really a very, very, very ancient, highly sophisticated culture of looking after country, which I'd really like to acknowledge. All right, so today I'm going to be talking to you about Farm It Forward, which is the social enterprise that I coordinate. I can see that Hannah is here, and Hannah is one of the farmers of Farm It Forward. So it's wonderful to see you, Hannah. And so we will be seeing Hannah in some of these photos, and Hannah will be seeing herself in some of my presentation. So let's begin. The first thing I want to start from is where we are journeying from. So we are journeying from an era that we like to call the Anthropocene. So anthropos being the human. So we have a way of life that is extremely human-centric. And it might surprise you that up there in my title, I talk about desertification, and underneath it may look to you as a non-desert, but I'll explain why it is a desert in a minute. We are moving, our standpoint as the Farm It Forward team is moving away from our conventional farming methods of today. So farmers at the moment still are really, really linked to a treadmill that was put to them probably after the Second World War. And that is that treadmill of chemical fertilizers, pesticide use and herbicide use. Why? Because we've transitioned from a place where our food and the food that we were growing was for ourselves and our community. And so we grew a great diversity of different foods for ourselves and for our community. We moved from that to a place where our food was grown as a commodity or treated as a commodity. And all of a sudden, our food system became very reductionist and fragmented. And for a farmer to be able to be competitive in their field, what they needed to do was grow more of one single thing. So what you can see in that image there is a broccoli farm. Why? Because for the farmer, it is really most viable. In fact, the only way farmers can make their enterprise viable is by selling their produce direct. But where we've gotten to now is a place where most farmers don't sell their produce direct. It is being sold to resellers. So it gets sold twice, if you like. And often that is not a good deal for the farmer. At this point, in order to make ends meet, the large supermarket chains, the large duopoly are the ones that are asking or buying the produce from most conventional farmers. And what they want is thousands and thousands of one type of vegetable. The only way that a farmer can remain viable is by selling thousands and thousands of one vegetable, like for instance, this broccoli. As you know, this is not a natural system. And so there is no natural way of growing this many of one type of vegetable. And so you have to have recourse to fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. And the reason why these broccolis are looking absolutely amazing is that they are constantly fed artificial fertilizers in order to stay green. And they are, lots of herbicide is used around their roots so that there's no weeds. And lots of herbicides and pesticides are sprayed onto them so that they don't get pests. So they're really, really intrinsically linked to that system, which destroys microorganisms in the soil. What happens when microorganisms in the soil are destroyed is desertification. So these broccolis are essentially growing on top of lifeless soil that doesn't have any biology in it. And so they are kept in on life support, basically, if you think of it that way, a hospital life support. Their nutrients are given to them daily, et cetera, et cetera. Without the biology in the soil, they won't have the amount and the amazing 42+ nutrients that healthy soil contains. The vegetable won't get any of those, and they'll have very, very few nutrients, and you'll notice that they're quite a bit less tasty as well because of it. All right, so all this is to say that food production in the Anthropocene is something that we need to move away from because it's causing desertification. But not only that, it is an extractive system. All of these broccolis are harvested, and then the soil becomes bare, and it stays bare for quite some time. And there's a lot of destruction happening of living things and waterways, et cetera, et cetera. So it is an extractive method. And as a consequence, farmers are moving further and further away from centers where their communities are, and they're more and more disconnected from community, from country, from what they're doing. So we want to move away from this kind of extractive, desertifying method and go towards a different design system. We need to redesign this system in order to journey into that symbiocene that Glenn Albrecht is talking about. So how are we going to do that? Well, what we propose is, of course, not a complete 360 or 180 turn. It's going to be a transitional process, but what we've done is designed a model where care farming is at its core. What is care farming? So you may have heard this term, care farming. It comes from the UK, I believe, but I'd love to be corrected. It's very difficult. I've done quite a bit of research on this term, and I'm not sure where it stems from exactly. It's used mostly in therapeutic horticulture by therapeutic horticulture bodies, and it's usually within institutions. So where farms are inside an institution, such as a detention center, or such as a mental health facility, et cetera, et cetera. What we propose here is to bring care farming back to the farming practices of today. And the way to do this is really to relocalize our farming. So not have farmers produce vegetables for 3 states away, or for even 3 miles away. We want farmers to be producing a diversity of foods, nutrient-dense foods, for their own community and selling it directly to their own community. We also want our farmers to be included in the community, and we want the community to come and help. We want the community to be part of the food growing system as opposed to separate to it. So that really leads to a reconnection, and that is absolutely critical in order to really transition to this symbiocene, which Glenn Albrecht talks about, which means let's look at the interconnectedness of natural systems and not just try to mimic them, but also use our critical thinking and really just jump in and be a part of that already existing natural system. And really our Indigenous people had and still have a real connection in this way, which often they call connection to country, which is something we need to get in contact with. We need to reconnect with land, with place, and with our people. So again, it's really, really important to bring food growing back into our cities, into our towns, into our villages, and include our community in the food growing practices. Why? Also because of the mental health benefits of growing a garden and the mental health benefits of growing our own nutrition. Our DNA evolved for thousands of years in order to be in contact with these microbes in the soil. We know now that when we touch soil and we smell soil, there are actinobacteria that we are inhaling and that are making us reconnect to country, making us feel well. And that wellness feeling comes really from the fact that we are part of this natural system and that it re-welcomes us in, and we can feel that welcome when we get back in contact with it. So it's really important to create a socially connected food system. So not only to grow food on a small scale in our backyards, but also go to that one step up, one scale up to see, okay, how can we really grow the bulk of our own food? How can we contribute in growing the bulk of our own food? How can we look after the people who grow the bulk of our own food? Something that Farm It Forward and the Farm It Forward model does is it employs young people. And we have at the moment, 5 young people employed, not on a full-time basis, definitely on a casual to part-time basis. And it's really, I feel it's really, really important from my experience working with young people and from my experience as a young person. There are really a lot of things that we are just starting to scratch the surface of. We do feel much eco-anxiety, much anxiety for the future. We know a lot more about what's going to happen next and about this chain of reactions that's going to be happening from now on. And it's really important to acknowledge this and be with our young people and be with them as opposed to try and teach them something. There's actually very little we have to teach our children. They have more to teach us at the end of the day. And it's really important to have a sense of togetherness, to have a sense of inclusivity, and to support each other in order to generate this hope. You know, there is an incredible amount of hope in his book, Earth Emotions, sorry. In his book, Earth Emotions, Albrecht really talks a lot about this need for acknowledging the neurodiversity of people. We're not all designed to sit here and listen to one person talk. We're not all designed to be sitting in a classroom and staying still for hours on end. We're all designed differently, and that's for a reason, and that needs to be really fostered and supported. And the really lovely thing about Glenn Albrecht is that he has a huge amount of hope that there is really the key is really in that generating connectedness to land, connectedness to country, and connectedness to each other. So we do things like high school outreach. So Hannah, who's in the chat today, runs these wonderful, and she's in that photo on the right-hand side there. She runs once a week, Katoomba High School kids can choose to come and work on our Farm It Forward plot at Headspace in Katoomba as part of their sport program. So it's really fantastic because, again, neurodiversity, diversity of humans. A lot of humans, or some humans, don't particularly enjoy sport, but still enjoy and still benefit from being outside and doing things. And this is a wonderful solution for them. We also recently had this lovely boy here with the yellow jacket, Killian. He did his work experience with us for a week and had some wonderful, absolutely wonderful contributions to make. He worked with us for a week and it was quite amazing. Both of these two boys, Jude and Killian, really get the Farm It Forward design system. They understand it instantly. And it's interesting because it's been quite tricky to explain it to grown-ups. Quite tricky to explain it, perhaps because of the logical nature of it. And we're so used to now being in quite illogical, functioning in quite illogical ways that it's really difficult for us to grasp very, very logical, very, very straightforward things. Okay, so I touched a little bit on selling fresh produce direct. The really important, I really can't say this enough, farmers selling their produce directly to their community means that their community knows their farmer, which is an extremely important relationship to foster, really, really important social relationship to foster. And the produce tends to be a lot more affordable for people, which means it's a win-win for both sides. Why is it more affordable for people? Because when food is resold, and not everybody, I didn't know this until a couple of years ago, the supermarket or whatever, the reseller, the greengrocer will buy the produce from the farmer at a low price and then put a markup on that price and they'll make money out of that, if that makes sense. So often the farmer needs to sell their produce at a cheaper price to a reseller, whereas if they sell their produce direct to the consumer, they get the full share of the growth of the vegetables. So to me, that is logical. Interesting, it's logical, yet the way that our duopoly functions, especially in Australia and in the US, is that the most illogical thing ever, which is the farmer sells their produce extremely cheaply to large chain supermarkets who resell it to their full gain. So the farmer doesn't get a fair share. and doesn't make a proper living out of doing one of the most incredible public services of all, which is growing our food. So it's really important that we understand this in order to set up a new design system, to redesign and to move more into a symbiotic relationship between the people who are consuming nutrient-dense produce and the person or the people who are growing this nutrient-dense produce, looking after the land in doing so, and that really, really magical relationship that happens when there's exchange between these two entities. In order for things to be done with care, and in permaculture, they talk a lot about obtaining, it's one of the permaculture principles is obtain a yield. I think where permaculture designers are coming from there is they're trying to say that if it's not financially viable for growers to do the right thing, then they won't do the right thing and not because they don't want to, because they are conditioned to jumping onto that treadmill that I was talking about in order to make a decent living for themselves. So it's really important that we stop blaming or shaming, because it's really important that we acknowledge that we've gotten to a point where the Band-Aid solutions have taken us so far away from that symbiosis that we've just got to turf all that out and redesign the system from scratch. So with Farm It Forward, we use technology. So it's really important. I did want to put in there the use of appropriate technologies, because our knowledge and our thinking has gotten us so many great tools to be able to use. So we use an online pre-purchase and farm gate pickup system, which means that you can see on the right, that's our website. People jump onto our website, they pre-purchase our produce, so they get some beans and a bunch of beetroot and some zucchini and potatoes and eggs. And they pre-purchase them from Wednesday to Friday and then come and pick up their produce on Saturday mornings from our farm gate. This means there's no food miles, because all of the people who are doing this are local. So they're coming from, at the most, the next suburb over. It means that all of the food, all of the produce, all of the funds and all of the money for the produce goes straight to the people who are growing the produce and looking after the soil, and they can do it in a financially viable way. And we've also completely minimized overheads by using solar energy and by harvesting rainwater, which means that if you look at it from a business design point of view, the things that you need to be really careful of are overheads, electricity costs and internet and all of that kind of stuff, what it costs to run an enterprise. And by minimizing those overheads and making sure that you use your time and energy efficiently, you can create an enterprise that functions well. And it doesn't have to do everything. It just needs to do a couple of things well. Yes. Okay, so for those of you who are not quite familiar with how Farm It Forward works, we have 7 market gardening plots. All of our market gardening plots are about 1.5, so altogether about 1.5 acres of land under food production, regenerative food production. And the land is owned by people from the community who have brought themselves forward and said, I'd like you to use I have loads of land and I have low mobility, or I have small children and I don't have time, or I have a mental health issue and I can't make the most of this patch of land, but I'd love to give it to you to do this. And so all of these people, you can see them in the photos here. There's Rosie on the left with her little Nell, who's now walking around quite happily, and Sylvia in the middle, who we'll talk about a little bit later, and Kate here with Jude, who you saw before. So you can see there's a big diversity of humans who are donating their land, not donating their land, but lending their land to food production. What do they get in return? They receive veggies. They can pick veggies freely from their own market gardening plot on their land, but they also can order from our website, from our FarmGate website for free with a promotional code, which gives them 100% discount. So they can order their serves of vegetables for the week, put in a promo code, which makes it free, and we bring it to them. So they receive nutrient-dense food in return for lending their land to the enterprise. And for many, for for a few of these people, this means they have access to regenerative food. They have access to contact. We are there. We visit our plots really regularly, and that means there's a human there quite often, and it's lovely and it's wonderful. A lot of our landowners are at risk, in an at-risk category of social isolation. So it's an incredible thing to be able to do, to create that connection and re-include all of those people who generally are marginalized in our Anthropocene ways. So we need to re-include the totality of our community into the act of food growing, the act of looking after soil, the act of all of this. So Sylvia, who's there in the middle, can sit in her lounge room and think, wow, there's soil being regenerated on my land. There's food being grown for the community on my land. And that allows for her to sit and feel really emotionally connected and like she is a part of something really special. We also donate to a local food relief program. So it's really important to acknowledge that not everybody, there are some incredibly tough situations and some people who are from really, really disadvantaged backgrounds. And so we teamed up with a local food relief program and bring them 20 to 30 serves of vegetables. They have a drop-in center. People can come and help themselves to vegetables that are grown locally in their backyard. Okay, so one thing that I really want to reinforce is there are some really important skills that you need in order to start an enterprise like this one. And really, none of the really important ones are pieces of paper or studies or anything like this. The really, really important things that you need are good communication and active listening skills. So it's really, really, really important for us to relearn. In order to reweave our social fabric, we need to relearn how to communicate effectively and how to actively listen to each other. So this is for me, very difficult to talk like this because I really love seeing the faces of the people I'm talking to, and it's quite tricky in this way. But it's so important to practice good communication, active listening. There are some wonderful places you can go and learn about this. There's Robin Clayfield, who does some really great social permaculture things. There's also nonviolent communication, authentic relating, but really the really important thing is go and volunteer, go and do things for your community. And that's how you'll pick up those good communication skills, those active listening skills, is by just really setting yourself the task of going and listening to others. And that's really important. Another thing that's really important is mutual trust. So we're in a system in the Anthropocene where we have problems trusting each other, and that's fair enough. I understand why. There's this giganticism that is really, we are putting ourselves to the mercy of the larger entities that are doing things for us instead of really taking it upon ourselves to generate that change. And that really has to do with mutual trust. Find people that you trust and who trust you and really believe in what you're doing. Without Sylvia, without Hannah, without Jimmy, without all of the people in my team, we all trust each other. We all have this mutual trust. And that's what allows us to look out for each other and to communicate effectively and run this enterprise. Another really important thing, because a lot of people tend to think that we might not have a hierarchical system, or we might not have a kind of a system of leadership and clear roles. We do. It's really important. Our First Nations people all over the world have incredible systems put in place. And yes, you can call them hierarchies. They are very benign hierarchies. There are people who are the elders that you call upon, that you talk to with your issues, and they also listen to you and you listen to them. And it's a mutualistic relationship, but there is still leadership. There are still really clear laws and really clear roles and responsibility. We're not talking about a system where everybody does whatever they want, because that can create a lot of social confusion, a lot of social unrest, and a lot of lack of communication. So it's really important that that there is, if you're setting up an enterprise like this, clarity around leadership, and really clear, everybody knows where they're at and what their role is and what their responsibilities are, and also is constantly reminded by the leader or by the coordinator or whoever they are of what an amazing job they're doing. A lot of the time we need to be, what's the word? Sorry, we need to be, sorry, English isn't my first language, that we need to tell people that they're doing a fantastic job in order for them to feel empowered to continue with it. So it's really quite important to do this, and it's quite important for the leader to have that quality of noticing, active listening and active observation of what's happening within the people on their team. Of course, some social work and mental health first aid training is really important, really useful, really something that would be useful, but we didn't have any of this and still managed quite okay. It's really skills that you can pick up as you go. Same thing with market gardening skills. They're also, and project managing skills. Yes, it's great to get some market gardening skills and project management skills before you start, or have someone on your team that's got that, or someone on your team that has those skills. But you can really start and learn by doing, and that's probably the best way to learn is by making lots of mistakes and doing and starting again and doing all of that. Okay, so I just wanted to show you, how are we going for time? 2:53, we're good. Excellent. I just wanted to read you just a short piece of writing from Sylvia, who's one of our, you can't see Sylvia because I've got this, just put that away. Okay, can everybody see? I can't even see the participants.
Yeah, good.
Okay. All right, so recently Sylvia's written a piece of writing which I thought was really, really special, and I wanted to share it here because it talks a lot about the Symbiocene. She says, "What's in it for you?" I've been asked. It's around aging in place, an alternative to downsizing. I get hurt when commentators say retirees should free up their family homes for the next generation, as if blaming us for the housing crisis. I'm not a pawn to be moved around on a chessboard. My home is shelter. Yes, a basic human need, actually a basic animal need, which we share with Robbie Burns as we sleek at cowering timorous beasties. Over my working years, managing on a very low income while also child rearing and attempting to be a loyal helpmate in a difficult marriage, my heart went into my home and garden, landscape and neighborhood. My inclination is to find a way to dig my heels in and stay here for the peaceful, healing, regenerative stage of life retirement brings. My strategy is to share. I use my superannuation savings to tack on an extra bathroom with this in mind. This is not a business arrangement, it's community, mutuality. It's to do with love of the land, the love with which blossoms amongst people who come together in cooperation and enjoyment. So you can see that there's real alignment and mutuality in terms of Sylvia's viewpoints, and I just find that really beautiful. What she wrote. So here's Hannah's. So Hannah is a Farm It Forward employee, and she's a farmer, and she's a wonderful human, and that's her and her sister on the photo. Her whole family came to visit that day, and it was really amazing. So, and this is Hannah's account or a little writing that she wrote about her experience. FIF has absolutely allowed me to connect with people. I'm able to directly work and interact with the community on a weekly level at our residence houses and when we host volunteer sessions. We teach people about gardening, farming and permaculture, and our volunteer sessions, working with the community, working with the community, working with plants and learning invaluable skills to combat food insecurity, which I believe to be the most important issue in society. So that's just an incredible piece of writing, and food insecurity is something we do need to contend with journeying into the Symbiocene. So in order to journey into the Symbiocene and maintain food security, instead of making our food system about larger and larger areas, we need to make our food system smaller and smaller, or a sum of decentralized small food growing enterprise, a sum of decentralized small enterprises that are growing food locally for each local area. It's interesting because here in English-speaking countries, in Australia, in America, maybe a little bit in the UK, we don't tend to buy our food directly from our farmers. But if you travel anywhere else in the world, you're much more likely to go and buy directly from the grower who's carried their their produce back from their fields and is there in the town selling their produce. We've got to go back to that. That's really important. We've got to start cherishing our food growers again, and we need to even go a little bit deeper than that and go and help them out on their fields every so often and say hello and do all of those things that reconnects us to the growers of our food. This is Grace, who volunteered with us for quite a while, probably 6 or 7 months before she had to go back to uni. So this was in the peak of COVID. We could continue to run our volunteer sessions in the first COVID pandemic outside because we could social, our fields are quite large, so we can social distance and we're in an outdoor environment. So it was really fantastic to be able to keep that going. And she writes, Farm It Forward to me is a wonderful opportunity for learning and connecting. I began volunteering soon after moving to Katoomba, and it quickly became an important part of my week. I met a beautiful array of people who were all eager to chat, swapping stories and knowledges, and everyone was so welcoming. I quickly became aware of and inspired by the transformative nature of permaculture, gardening, and farming for both individuals and communities. It's a beautiful thing to feel a part of, and I'm so grateful for all that I've learned. So that really is the crux of it, is the mental health aspect of reconnecting with healthy soil. A lot of the microorganisms in healthy soil we need in our gut as well, and indirectly they do make their way into our gut and into our digestive system by eating produce and by working in the soil and working in the garden. So it's important that we maintain the health of that soil by keeping it diverse and using particular practices. So we use a no-dig system. We don't use any rotary hose or anything that traditional market gardeners use. We simply add organic matter on top, and that's all we do. It's also called a permabed system. So permanent beds, they don't get tossed around at all. So that's really, really important, is that as soon as the scale is smaller, and I'm not talking about backyard scale, small backyard scale, that's important too. Doing that and reconnecting to place, doing that is really important. But just that middle scale between a medium to large market garden and a backyard. So we are kind of in the middle of the two. And at that scale, you can grow a very decent amount of food, and you can put a dent in the food that gets bought in from much further afield. And it's important to do that. All right, I'm going to go into, I just wanted to quickly, just for those of us who aren't familiar with Glenn Albrecht's essay, because I'm kind of talking a lot about this symbiocene. So the symbiocene is this term that Glenn Albrecht, who is a thinker and a wonderful nature lover and thinker from Western Australia, he was really fascinated. As a boy, he was always out in nature, and he was really fascinated by birds, and he wanted to become a ornithologist. He wanted to study birds, and then he went into sociology and psychology instead. So he was particularly interested in human psyche and how people functioned. And in his essay, there are a couple of bits of his essay that really resonated a lot in terms of what we're trying to do with Farm It Forward, with designing this type of social enterprise. So he says, the young, weak, and vulnerable must get their fair share. It's fundamental to life in order to give the totality the greatest chance of survival and flourishing. Symbiomimicry in human enterprise will both generate and distribute resources so that in nurturing all humans, we nurture the life support system on which we all depend. So this talks a lot about the marginalized humans. The first thing I think that we did when we first started Farm It Forward was look at council data and look at who the most marginalized people in our community were, and who were the people who were most at risk of being isolated out and just completely excluded from society. All of those people, as we journey into the Symbiocene, need to be re-included in our systems. And the Farm It Forward model, where you don't have to have good mobility, you don't have to move out of where you live, you don't have to stop looking after small children, but you can still be a part of something, is really essential, really re-including all of the marginalized parts of our communities. Another really interesting term that Albrecht uses is symbiocracy. So there's been a lot of talk, there's real problems with our system of democracy now, because it's no longer a real democracy in the sense that we've gotten to a point where it's more of a who's the most powerful and the most powerful wins, which is not what democracy initially was all about. So Albrecht talks about symbiocracy, which is a type of leadership structure, I guess, or governing structure that means, and that is very similar to our Indigenous people's way. So when I say this, I'm talking about Indigenous law, Indigenous law, L-A-W, and Indigenous lore, L-O-R-E. There's a wonderful book, and the name of the amazing writer escapes me now, but the name of the book is "The Land is the Source of the Law." So if there is a system of law that is absolutely the same for all, and it comes from the natural system, there is no one person who dictates it. It is equal for all, and it's in a system where everybody is looking at the interconnectedness of everything and fostering the interconnectedness of everything, and that's what the system of law is based on. So that's symbiocracy. So it requires those who govern to have an in-depth understanding of total ecosystems and the symbiotic interrelationships that enable them to function. In order to live together, humans must exercise their intelligence and ingenuity to achieve overall harmony in a community of interests. Within a symbiocracy, Earth rulers must ponder what kind of mutual development is permissible to enable living together. We must also remember that a place is critical to, I'm going to start again. We must also remember that place is critical to effective symbiocracy, as only those with close and intimate ties to particular places are in a position to know their place and make decisions about its health and vitality. So, we might talk about displacement, because in Australia, there is this sense of displacement, but also you are in the place that you are in, and you can look after that place and acknowledge that place that you are in right now. And that really is the crux of it, is how do we move out of the paralysis by analysis that we tend to get into, and into the right here, right now. What place am I in right now, and how can I look after it as much as I possibly can?